13, Optional by Oscar. Okay, Oscar brings up a point here about an individual who is very much against homosexuality and gay marriage, a colleague of mine and a friend, and I'm not going to kick the crap out of him right here. But I am going to say that I started writing Mariposa almost a year and a half ago, a follow-on from Quantico's, written back in 2004, 2005. And what Mariposa is about is the right wing, the extreme right wing, having been pushed out of office, is now getting a little gnarly. They are getting very much interested in deposing the government, overthrowing the government, seceding, etc. And in the last few months since the election, we've started to see signs of that. So I feel justified in plotting my novel this way, a little alarmed that it's happening so quickly. At least they could wait until November when it's in the news cycle. But I find this whole thing to be amazingly stupid. It seems like the far right is there to destroy its influence on American civilization and just make themselves so unlikable that no one will want to follow them for decades to come. I think what we need in terms of understanding how America works is that America always works by expanding the liberties of its members, of its tax-paying members. And if we don't allow them to be a full part of society, why should they pay taxes at all? Homosexuals are not aberrations. They are not abominations upon nature. I don't care what the Old Testament says. I would say, folks, that you want to look at the New Testament and spend less time staring at the Old Testament. New Testament doesn't have a lot to say about homosexuality, and it's a more advanced book than the Old Testament. The other thing is that if you're going to really leave this country just because of some issue like gay marriage, if you're going to preach sedition, or if you're going to preach the overthrow of a democratically elected government, maybe you should keep that secret. Just a little warning here. Not that we're going to come and get you, because I don't think anybody really cares that much, but just so that you don't, lose friends and not influence people anymore. It's getting to the point where hate speech is no longer fashionable. So thank you very much for listening, and look forward to getting more responses from you on Reddit.
Excellent.
Okay.
Cool. Do you have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, I actually was thinking that a theme sort of in Eon and in that series of books was the Naderites,
right,
as being this kind of rejecting technology and kind of reluctantly following along. And in the context of the Cold War, that made a lot of sense because it was supposed to be a post-apocalyptic culture. Now we've got this kind of streak of anti-elitism, it's usually called, where it's not a rejection of technology; it's a rejection of the experts.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you think those are sort of the same, like two sides of the same coin, or do you see streaks of what you called Naderism originally in sort of current American culture, like that? Yeah.
Maybe. The whole point was that Nader opposed nuclear weapons, and so after the war was done, half the Earth was wiped out in the Eon universe. Excuse me. They thought this was a pretty good idea, and he was a pretty influential thinker. And if people had listened to him back in the 1970s, maybe we wouldn't have had that problem. Nader did some really cool stuff with regards to going after corporations, and that's still, I think, his main strength today, is going after the power brokers that are putting out shoddy products or shoddy philosophy. I don't agree with him on most of his points, but I think he's a very powerful and occasionally useful influence. As far as this going after experts, I find that fascinating, because I think there's always been a kind of cadre of people who believe they have the right to propound the truth. Whether they're scientists or religious experts or politicians, I've never trusted them. I believe a true scientist, true engineer, is someone who's always open to being wrong. And if what you're trying to do is justify old theories in the point of new evidence, that's a losing game. Science is about the world changing. Changes all the time. I wish that politics and philosophy and a few other things were equally flexible. But in fact, you've got many people who believe they seriously have good philosophies to defend, good ideas they need to defend. And that's part of this whole mix of back and forth. I don't believe that everyone is equally capable of rendering judgments on some issues, because many people haven't studied them. But if you have studied them and given them pretty serious thought and spent enough time to kind of bootstrap yourself into the process of understanding the problem, I think your opinion is valuable. And I don't agree with people who believe that you shouldn't express that opinion. I think you should. But if you express that opinion on little information, no self-education, no regular education, your opinion is going to be less useful to us. Unless, of course, you're a bloody genius, and that's pretty rare.
Kirk or Picard? And this one will get you in a lot of trouble if you're answering it.
You know, actually, I haven't followed all the new Star Trek TV shows. There are just too many of them. And having kids come along and so on. So I kind of ended my reign and dipped in after Next Generation. Just dipped in occasionally. So they both have their charms. I think Picard, in some respects, is a little more realistic, a little more second thinking about the whole idea. And but you know, the whole thing about Roddenberry's genius, and we were just talking about going down to Paramount Studios. Actually, I went down there in 1977 and had lunch with Gene Roddenberry. And at that point, he was asking questions, just him and I. You know, what do you think the next Star Trek should be? And I was kind of flabbergasted. I wasn't sure. I thought he'd done an awful good job with the first series. But in thinking that over, I think he was constantly trying to renew the franchise. And when he did the Next Generation character list, I was a little concerned about a robot named Data. And so I was a little, you know, serious and constructive in my science fiction. But it worked. That suite of characters worked just about as well as the original Star Trek suite did. And that was Roddenberry's genius, is he could put together a cast of characters that could attract audiences for season after season, movie after movie. And I think that J.J. Abrams has been well served by trying to keep that suite of characters intact in the new Star Trek. So let's tip our hats to Mr. Roddenberry for putting all those characters together. Picard or Kirk, I think they probably wouldn't get along very well, so who knows? The original Star Wars were so well edited and so well thought through and so well designed that discipline seemed to go out of it a little bit in the later Star Wars. Not sure how that happened or why. In a sense, it was kind of tragic because there was some of the most heartfelt emotion that could be gotten out of the denouement of what happens to turn, you know, our cute little kid into Darth Vader. But that emotional arc was a little lost. That said, I think that a lot of younger viewers, under 19, when the first Star Trek came out, that is not number 5, but number 4, but the first one. I think a lot of them really tied into this new version of Star Wars. They found access through even Jar Jar, the much despised Jar Jar. The kids loved him. And they put together a bunch of characters that appealed to people who were younger than the people who had seen the original Star Wars. So that wasn't entirely unsuccessful. And the movies went on to make a lot of money and a lot of franchises and stuff. So the universe was expanded. I would have liked to have seen a little more basic emotion and character arc and a little less spaceships and toys, but then that's just me. And I go way back to 1977 when I went to 20th Century Fox to see the press preview for the first Star Wars that was released. And everyone was just completely blown out of their seats by it. It was so refreshing, so loving in its approach to science fiction, so kind of irreverent in its approach to science fiction. You just had to love it. It knew its stuff very, very well, the way the people designed those spaceships and the way the monsters were made and the way the aliens were made and all that stuff. It was just very, very cool. Tough to replicate that, I think. It's like lightning in a bottle. And also, there was no CGI to speak of in those early films, just a few bits. When you can do everything, you have a bigger responsibility, as Spider-Man might say. If you can put anything, if you have the power to put anything on screen you want, with that power comes great responsibility.